Over the last 50 years, the world has sent more than $1.2 trillion in aid to Africa. The goal was simple: reduce poverty, build stronger economies, create a better future. But the results have been far more complicated than anyone expected. Today, hundreds of millions of Africans still live in poverty. Many countries remain heavily dependent on foreign aid. So what went wrong? If so much money was sent, why hasn't it produced the transformation so many hoped for? Welcome to Financial Cycles. Today, we're exploring one of the most controversial questions in modern economics. Can foreign aid sometimes make development harder instead of easier? For decades, the answer seemed obvious. If a country is poor, it needs more money. And if richer countries have more money, why not share it? The idea seemed impossible to argue against. Build schools, fund hospitals, improve roads, invest in development. If money helped rebuild Europe and North America, why wouldn't it work in Africa? For decades, that simple idea shaped foreign aid around the world. Governments, charities, and millions of ordinary people believed. That confidence didn't appear out of nowhere. There was one example that seemed to prove foreign aid could work. After World War II, much of Europe was in ruins. Cities had been destroyed, industries had collapsed, millions of people had lost their homes and livelihoods. The United States feared that economic collapse would push countries toward communism. So in 1948, it launched the Marshall Plan. Over the next 4 years, America invested more than $13 billion in Western Europe. The results were remarkable. Europe's economy recovered, trade expanded, living standards improved. To many policymakers, the lesson seemed clear. If foreign aid helped rebuild Europe, why couldn't it do the same for Africa? After the success of the Marshall Plan, many believed the same approach could work again. This time, the focus shifted to Africa. By the 1960s, many African countries had recently gained independence. Infrastructure was limited, and literacy rates remained low. But Africa also held enormous economic potential. It was rich in oil, copper, diamonds, and other valuable natural resources. Many believed that with enough support, the continent could follow the same path Europe had taken. The idea seemed straightforward: provide financial aid, support economic growth, build long-term trading partners, and strengthen political alliances. So the money began to flow. Year after year, more aid arrived. By the 1990s, Africa was receiving tens of billions of dollars every year. In some countries, foreign aid became one of the government's largest sources of funding. The expectation was clear: more money would lead to faster development. But that isn't what happened. Despite decades of financial support, economic growth remained weak across much of the continent. Many countries became even more dependent on foreign aid. Instead of asking whether the strategy itself was failing, the world responded by sending even more money. By the early 2000s, foreign aid had become one of the largest development efforts in modern history. But the results still fell far short of expectations. That leaves one important question. If sending more money wasn't enough, what was missing? To answer that, we need to look beyond money. Many economists believe the real difference wasn't how much aid a country received, it was the strength of its institutions. Institutions are the systems that keep a country working. They enforce laws, protect property, collect taxes, and hold governments accountable. After World War II, Europe already had these systems in place. The war had damaged them, but it hadn't erased them. Many African countries faced a very different reality. Most had only recently become independent. Their governments were new. Many of their institutions had been shaped during colonial rule to extract resources, not to build strong economies. That difference changed everything. Because money alone can't create development. It needs strong institutions behind it. Strong institutions don't guarantee success, but weak institutions make development much harder. When large amounts of aid enter countries with limited accountability, the money doesn't always reach the people it was meant to help. Some of it is lost to corruption. Some is wasted through poor management. And some strengthens governments that already struggle to serve their people. But corruption isn't the whole story. The bigger problem is how aid changes incentives. When governments receive a large share of their funding from foreign donors, they rely less on their own taxpayers. And when governments depend less on their own people, the pressure to improve public services becomes much weaker. Over time, the relationship between governments and citizens begins to change, and that can make long-term development even harder. One example helps explain how this works. Take Malawi. At one point, foreign aid provided more than 40% of the government's budget. Yet millions of dollars were lost through corruption and financial mismanagement. Funds that were meant to support public services were instead spent on luxury cars, private homes, and other personal expenses. You might expect scandals like these to bring major political change, but that rarely happened, because the government depended far more on foreign donors than on its own taxpayers. The people paying the price had very little power to demand change. And when governments become less accountable to their own citizens, long-term development becomes much harder. But weak institutions aren't the only challenge. Foreign aid can also make it harder for local businesses to grow. Strong economies are built over time. Small businesses expand, farmers invest, and entrepreneurs create jobs. Those businesses eventually become larger industries, but that process can be disrupted. When free or heavily subsidized goods enter a country, local businesses often struggle to compete. The textile industry is a good example. In several African countries, imported secondhand clothing became extremely common. Many local manufacturers were forced to close. Factories shut down, jobs disappeared, and local industries became weaker. The intention was to help, but local businesses found themselves competing with products they could never realistically match. That's a competition few local businesses can survive. The effects go even further. Over the last few decades, almost every country that escaped poverty followed a similar path. South Korea, Taiwan, China. They built factories, made products people wanted, and sold them around the world. Exports created jobs, brought in foreign income, and helped their economies grow. But that strategy depends on one important condition. Its exports have to stay competitive. Foreign aid can make that much harder. When large amounts of foreign money enter, it must be exchanged. That increases demand for the local currency and pushes its value higher. At first, that sounds like good news, but a stronger currency makes exports more expensive. Then, foreign buyers start buying from other countries. The money was meant to support growth, but in some cases, it made long-term growth much harder. But there was one final problem. Even when aid was well-intentioned, it often failed to create lasting change. Billions were spent on projects that never achieved their goals. Take Haiti after the 2010 earthquake. Billions flowed in, yet only a small share reached local institutions. Much was spent through foreign contractors. More than a decade later, many communities still lacked basic housing and sanitation. The problem was the system. When businesses fail, customers leave. When governments fail, voters can replace them. But aid works differently. If a project fails, there are very few consequences. Without accountability, the same mistakes are repeated again and again. In the end, the story of foreign aid isn't just about money, it's about how countries grow. For decades, billions of dollars were sent with the hope of ending poverty. Some of that aid saved lives, built schools, improved healthcare, expanded access to clean water, funded vaccination programs, and provided vital support during wars, famines, and natural disasters. Those achievements should never be ignored, but long-term prosperity is different. You can send money, you can send food, you can send medicine, but you can't export the conditions that create prosperity. Those have to be built. Strong institutions, a reliable legal system, governments that answer to their own people, businesses that can compete, invest, and create jobs, communities that become stronger without depending on outside support. That's how lasting economies are built. Not in a single year, not through one donation, but through decades of steady growth, investment, and accountability. Money can support that process, but it can't replace it. So the next time you hear that a country received billions in foreign aid, don't just ask how much was given. Ask what it helped build. Did it create stronger institutions? Did it help businesses grow? Did it leave the country more capable than before? Because in the end, development isn't measured by the money that enters a country. It's measured by what remains after the money is gone. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, because every financial cycle tells a story.